Everyone now recognizes you apologize to the left, you are giving them the proverbial rope with which they will hang you. You apologize, you bend the knee to the left, they want to take your head. There's no more grace, there's no more forgiveness. They just view it as racking up a metaphorical body count of people on the other side of the ideological spectrum that they can hold up there as examples to the rest of, you better say exactly what we tell you to say, think exactly what we tell you to think, or else this will happen to you too.
I wanted to play this for you because we were talking about just this crazy world where suddenly CNN, in the space of 12 hours yesterday, said, yeah, we've been wildly overcounting COVID deaths after we've been telling you that for years. And also they do a 4,000 or 5,000 word expose on the Biden crime family and basically acknowledge that the Hunter Biden laptop is real too. So all these things that were supposedly feverish dreams of the far right-wing conspiracy theorists are suddenly being confirmed as real. And meanwhile, the New York Times, and I think this is significant because the New York Times business model is essentially to tell far left-wing subscribers that they are super smart and they're on the right side of history. That is now their business model. They were saying, these are crazy quotes here, that disinformation is leading to the downfall of democracy. And this is like Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia. This is the New York Times publisher. His family, Sulzberger, owns the Times. Listen.
Disinformation and the broader set of misinformation, conspiracy, propaganda, clickbait, the broader mix of bad information that's corrupting the information ecosystem. What it attacks is trust. And once you see trust decline, what you then see is societies start to fracture. And so you see people fracture along tribal lines, and that immediately undermines pluralism. Mm-hmm. And, the undermining of pluralism is probably the most dangerous thing that can happen to a democracy. So I think if you're spending this week thinking about the health of democracies and democratic erosion, I think it's really important to work your way back up to where this starts. Terms like fake news and enemies of the people have been popularized cyclically in society and in some of the most, repressive and dangerous moments, Nazi Germany, Stalinist Russia, right?
Can I remind everybody, I think this is important, Clay, the term fake news was initially used in an anti-Trump fashion to mock the rubes who were believing these things that either Trump said or it was, the Trump voter, essentially. This is back in 2016. The Trump voter believes the fake news. They believe the fake news that's on Facebook. They're the ones. Donald Trump, in actually one of his most noteworthy moments of jujitsu, turned that around and started calling CNN the fake news. But I think people forget it. It's really important. They were trying to denigrate Trump voters, and Trump turned it around and made it one of the most powerful criticisms of the mainstream media. It really got under their skin. It really bothered them.
The story here, I believe, that's going to be told in 50 years, in 100 years, long after everybody listening today is gone, is, I believe, one of Trump fear so gripping left-wing media that they became everything that they claimed Trump was. And I think this is such an instructive lesson in history. You have to be very careful not to become what you hate. And what has occurred at the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC and CNN is they so convinced themselves that Trump was an authoritarian hell-bent on overthrowing democracy that they went and did all of the things themselves that they claimed Trump would do. And the number one way to think about this, and I just believe this gets to the essence of it so well, when Fauci said, "I am the science," the idea that any one person would consider themselves to be the science is such a fundamental rejection of everything that science stands for and the scientific method in general. Yet they became so convinced in their certitude, in their rightness, that they couldn't consider the other possibility. And anytime you are convinced of your moral rectitude, that is when true crimes against humanity happen. And Buck, this is why I've always said terrorists aren't funny. And people say, oh, well, what do you mean by that? Humor requires an understanding of nuance and a form of awareness about yourself that totalitarians cannot accept. And in this country where we're living today, who is the most humorless among us? The woke.
Oh, the woke are just totalitarians. They're commies. They're just commies without the full power to have the proletarian revolution that they would claim they want. But it's no different in the mindset.
And that's why the idea that I think Republicans need to lean into more and more, and you're starting to see it some, is we're the party of humor. We're the party of jokes. Like, we support comedians' ability to sometimes say things that might be a little bit offensive. And we were texting about this last night. I think we're starting to win some of these cultural battles. And it's not getting a lot of attention, but there aren't very many people getting canceled anymore. Right? I mean, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're going to say something on today's show and there's going to be a huge storm coming after us. But who was the last person with right-leaning values who has ended up getting canceled?
So I think that there's definitely been a shift on this, and it is because I believe there's a realization now on the right for everyone who is actually devoted to freedom. Free speech principles, freedom as a general concept, constitutional protection of individual rights, which is a foundational precept of our freedoms. So anyone who believes in that understands that feeding some of our own to the woke mob never placates them. It only encourages them. So there is no longer this decision. Like, neither you nor I are ever sitting here like, oh, did you see what that guy said on TV on Newsmax? He should never work again. Like, no, we don't do that. And because I believe, and I agree with you, you should only ever apologize if you offended your own conscience or fell short of your own ideals. Because as human beings, you can apologize if you make a mistake. But apologizing because of pressure, absolutely not. And now there's no more pressure from our side internally, I think, from people to say, well, if we just police our own, maybe we'll meet in the middle. We will not meet in the middle. The left has no middle. They want totalitarian thought control. That's where I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I also think when some people don't apologize, it emboldens other people to do two things: say what they really think, and also, if they come through the fire, to not apologize either. And there was so much bending of the knee that this woke cottage industry got lazy, and they just presumed, oh, if we have 20 powerful blue check marks come after you for some opinion that you shared, you're going to apologize, and we're going to basically get the scepter of dominance. And then a lot of people said, no, I mean, you don't have to agree with me on anything, but why would I apologize to you for something that I actually believe?
Well, also, and then the other part of this that is probably even a bigger motivation. I was, trying to stick the landing after doing a couple of flips there, but the basics here, everyone now recognizes you apologize to the left, you are giving them the proverbial rope with which they will hang you. You apologize, you bend the knee to the left, they want to take your head. There's no more grace. There's no more forgiveness. They just view it as racking up a metaphorical body count of people on the other side of the ideological spectrum that they can hold up there as examples to the rest of, you better say exactly what we tell you to say, think exactly what we tell you to think, or else this will happen to you too. So when you see that, I think you also recognize, you don't want to get Prince Joffrey'd for the, or you know what I mean? Yeah, Joffrey. That makes sense.
Well, Joffrey choked on a cake, spoiler alert.
Well, but I mean what he did to...
Oh, yeah. Well, and I'll give you an example, Buck. In sports, some guy got almost canceled for saying, hey, women's sports are not as fun to watch as men's sports. And then, like, people were like, oh, this is really insulting. It's like, no, actually, if you go watch a high school girls basketball game and you go watch a high school boys basketball game, they play back-to-back. Objectively, the men's game is way better. That doesn't mean the women can't play. It doesn't mean the women can't work hard at their craft as well. But men, when they play the same sport as women, are better at them. And generally speaking, men's sports are more fun to watch than women's.
Is there a sport, Clay, man of sports, that you think the female product of that sport as a viewer is superior to the male product?
Gymnastics.
Interesting. I was going to say either beach volleyball or tennis.
Tennis, I like women's tennis because I prefer 3 sets over 5, because a 5-set match is like a 4-hour commitment. I'd rather watch a 3-set match.
Totally true. And as a tennis weekend warrior who's been playing since he was a little kid, you can get a lot more from the female professional game as a guy, because the men's professional game is
all
like
power.
80% serve, and everything else is kind of and you're not serving 130 miles an hour, folks, right? So you're never going to get there. The women's serve and pace and tactics is actually more interesting to recreational players, I think, in a lot of cases. I mean, not people that play at the very high level, but if you're a weekend warrior, because it's closer to what you recognize as the tennis that you play. So women's tennis for sure. And by the way, they have equal purse for the U.S. Open and some of these other ones. But yeah, gymnastics are also. I can't even think of a famous male gymnast. And
I just think the women's, like the way that they do women's gymnastics, like the floor routine for women, the rings are tough to watch for men. I just think the overall product is better for women in gymnastics. I think for you, your argument on tennis is 100% true, because there's a lot of power. And so many men's points are super short, 1 or 2 strokes, as opposed to actually a battle.
Yeah. I mean, I'm about half as fast and significantly heavier than I used to be when I played soccer as a young lad. But I still think you put me out there with a women's national team, I'd wreck some ladies on defense. I'd get a ton. So it's just not as it's like a high school level. It's like a good high school level men's game, high level men's game, women's soccer, for example. So it's just not as good of a spectator sport.
Nowhere near as good of a product.
Yeah, it's just not as good of a product.
And that's not anti-women's sports. But, I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, there was so much fear that even if you said, men's basketball is better than women's, people were like, oh, how would you dare say that? And now it's starting to circle back around where people can say what they really think.
Yeah, I would want to play beach volleyball, but I don't have those kind of abs, man. You got to have abs to play beach volleyball.
LA listeners know all about this. Like, Manhattan Beach, their beach volleyball tournament is one of the coolest, unique sporting events that occurs. They have a monster every year tournament. It's really cool.